Today we're going to be learning about vertical and horizontal shifts. So we already know how to find amplitude and period. The new thing we're looking at today is our h and our k, which are our vertical and horizontal shifts. So h is when something is added inside the parentheses. This is when it's being shifted horizontally, which means left or right. The thing you need to remember about your h value is it is always the opposite of what you would think. So if you're adding a number, you're actually moving left, and if you're subtracting, you're actually moving right. So this is the same as what you learned in algebra. Same thing. With your k value, which is being added or subtracted outside the parentheses, this is now your vertical shift. And this is the same as what you would expect. So if you're adding, you're moving up, and you're subtracting, you're moving down. So this is really the only new thing we're learning today. So let's take a look at some examples. So for number 1, your first step is the same as what we've been doing all of last week, which is first graphing our graph using just amplitude and period. So let's take a look at this first example. We can tell already it's a sine function, it's positive, so I'm going to draw my sketch. My amplitude is 3. My period, so I'm looking at the number in front of the x. Right here there's nothing here, which means it's the same thing as having a 1 right there. Alright, so to find my period, I'm going to do 2 pi divided by 1, which is just 2 pi. So my period is 2 pi. I'm going to go ahead and label this on my sketch. So I know this stops at 2 pi, which means the midpoint is pi. And because the amplitude is 3, I know it's going to go up to 3 and down to -3. So I'm going to draw this just like I've been doing the last week. My first point is at 0, 0. And then I have a point at pi 0. And halfway in between this, I want it to go up to positive 3. So pi over 2, positive 3. I'm going to connect those. There's also a point at 2 pi at 0. And halfway in between this, I'm going to go down to -3. So this is what my graph would look like if I just graphed it with amplitude and period. Now I'm going to add on the horizontal shift. So this is something I'm going to do in a different color so that you can tell. If you have something in a different color, this would be great for you to see easier. So horizontally, let's look at our h. We are adding pi over 2 here. So because we're adding, we know horizontal is the opposite of what you would expect. Instead of going to the right, this is actually moving left pi over 2. So what I'm going to do is draw a line. If I moved my function left pi over 2, here is pi over 2 to the left. I'm going to draw a new dotted line to show that this is what I'm doing. I'm moving this whole function left pi over 2. For my vertical shift, it's adding 1. So that means I'm moving up 1. And again, I'm moving up. So let's look on our y-axis. Here is 1. So if I move up 1, this is my new axis. So this is what I'm doing. I'm shifting this entire function up here. So let's take a look at what the shift actually looks like. This was my original origin. This is my new origin. Right? So to get from my original origin to my new origin, what I did is move left 3 spaces and then up 1 space. So really what I'm doing is taking each of these points and moving it left 3 spaces and up 1 space. So let's start with our very first one here. Left 3, up 1. Makes sense. This was at the origin, so this one's still at the origin. This one right here, I'm moving left 3, up 1. Left 3, up 1. Let's connect them. Down here, left 3, up 1. And then the last one, left 3, up 1. And so this is my final function, f of x, with the horizontal and the vertical shifts. So if you aren't doing this in different colors, make sure that you're labeling at the end, which is the one that is your final answer. Okay, for all these functions with horizontal and vertical shifts, we're only going to draw one complete cycle, so we don't need to extend it to either side. We're just going to leave it like this. But we do know it keeps on going forever and ever, which means our domain is still -infinity to infinity. To find our range, we're going to have to look a little closer at this function. So this function, the lowest point it gets to is right here. This is the bottom of your function, and that is at a y value of -2. So your range is from -2 to the highest point it gets to is up here. This is the top of your function, and that's at 4. So your range is from -2 to 4. Okay, let's look at number 2. So same thing as before. Let's first do just amplitude and period. We know it's a negative cosine, which means it starts at the bottom. Our amplitude is 2. And to find our period, we're going to do 2 pi divided by your b value, which is the number in front of the x. It's the pi over 3. Dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal, so we're going to do 2 pi times, let's flip pi over 3, it turns into 3 over pi. Pi's cancel out, and this just gives us a period of 6. So on my sketch, here is 6. Your midpoint then will be at 3. So again, we're going to sketch this graph on top of our chart. So we have -2 is our beginning point. We know at 3 we want the point to be at the top, so that's going to be at 2. And then at 6 we want the point to be at the bottom at -2. And to make our graph a little bit more accurate, we know that in the middle of 0 and 3 it's going to hit the x-axis, so I can make another point here at 0. Because halfway in between here is where it should cross the x-axis. So let's connect them. Halfway in between 3 and 6 is right here. That's where it hits a 0. So that's what my graph looks like with just amplitude and period. Now let's add on the shifts. So adding 1 inside the parentheses tells you it's horizontal, and because it's the opposite of plus, we want to be moving left 1. So moving left 1, be careful here. 1 does not mean 1 space. You have to be careful of the labeling. So 1 is actually 2 spaces here, because see how from 0 to 1 is 2 spaces? From 0 to -1 is 2 spaces. So you need to be careful that you draw your line here. You want to move 1 unit, not 1 space. Okay, for your vertical shift, you're subtracting, which means we're going down 2. And in this case, again, we're looking at the labeling. 2 units is 2 spaces. So going down 2 means that we're ending right here. And now let's look at what has changed from our original origin to our new origin. So to get from our original origin to our new origin, we had to move left 2 spaces, down 2 spaces. So now I'm counting the spaces. And that's what I'm going to follow when I plot all of these points. So be careful you're not starting at this original point, because this is not the origin. Right? So look from this origin to this origin, what has changed. Okay, so if I take this point, I'm going left 2, down 2. Here's my new point. Left 2, down 2. And then I'm connecting all of them together. And this is my final function. So again, because it continues going, it's still negative infinity to infinity. My lowest point on this graph is -4. My highest point is right here, which is actually at y equals 0. So my range is from -4 to 0. Okay. 2 more examples. So again, let's first start by drawing our amplitude and period. Okay, so this is my original function with the amplitude and period. Now I'm going to add on the horizontal shifts. So this minus tells you you're actually moving right 2 pi over 3. And 2 pi over 3 is right here, which means we've moved it to this line. And our shift is plus 2, which means we're moving up 2. Here is where y is equal to 2. So this is my new line. And so from the origin to this new point, I'm moving 1, 2, 3, 4, right 4 spaces, and up 2. So right 4, up 2, here is my new point. Right 4, up 2, right 4, up 2, right 4, up 2, and right 4, up 2. So this is my f of x. Domain is still negative infinity to infinity, and my range goes from the lowest point's -1, and the highest point is at 5. Okay, let's do one more example. Positive cosine. Your amplitude is 2. Your period is going to be 2 pi over 4, which simplified is pi over 2. So here's 2, here's pi over 2. Halfway in between is going to be where it goes down to hit its middle point. That's my original graph. And now I'm going to shift it. So plus 4 pi over 3 means I'm moving left 4 pi over 3. We know pi over 3 is 2 spaces. So this is pi over 3. This is -2 pi over 3. -3 pi over 3. -4 pi over 3. So this is my new axis. -1 means I'm moving down 1. So let's look at our axis. Here's 2, so that means 1 must be right here. So from my original origin to my new origin, I've moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces to the left and 1 space down. And so for my first point, I'm going to move 8 spaces to the left, 1 space down. This one's kind of halfway in between, but I can still count 8 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 space down. And then 7, 8, 1 space down. Here is my new function right here. Okay, so my domain is -infinity to infinity. My range is from, my bottom point is at -3. Top point is at 1.